Arthur scanned the screen with his eyes as he woke up with the first light of dawn. Everything continued in its usual flawless order. As a technology billionaire, his world was built on numbers, algorithms, and digital solutions. His heart worked as fast as a computer processor. But emotions? They were a distant concept. Arthur had never lost his faith in technology since childhood. In a small village, he had unlocked the doors of the digital world by writing his first programs on his father's old computer. Back then, everything was simple: numbers, codes, operations. Whenever he encountered a problem, he believed he could find the solution within an algorithm. Love was also a problem. It was just another search for a solution. But as always, the solution was not in this world. His company had reached the stage of developing a dating application to solve the difficulties of human relationships. Could artificial intelligence decipher the human heart? Arthur believed it was possible. Data could analyze people's emotional states, desires, and preferences and use them to find the most suitable matches. To him, love was a calculation, just like everything else. The artificial intelligence Arthur had programmed could analyze each user's experiences, past relationships, ambitions, and fears. This data had become a perfect tool for finding potential matches. But everything had advanced one step further. Now, the app was not just trying to understand a user's past, but also their personality, deepest desires, and even their subconscious. That day, Arthur had implemented a new update. A system where users could be matched not only theoretically, but also emotionally. Now, people wouldn't just share similar hobbies and interests. They would also be compatible on a spiritual and emotional level. Arthur was excited to test the new matches. The system was working perfectly, but something was missing. One morning, Arthur's algorithm had begun to recognize him. The company's latest project suggested registering him in the system as a user. For the first time, he considered creating a profile for himself. His faith in technology and his confidence in providing people with the right answer about love had grown once again. At that moment, the application suggested a perfect match for Arthur, Alice. Alice was a stranger in Arthur's world. When Arthur examined Alice's profile, he couldn't make sense of it. Alice was a woman with no connection to technology, living in harmony with nature. Her world was far removed from Arthur's endless streams of data. She didn't even bother to establish a presence on social media. She found writing even the simplest text messages tedious and harbored a deep resentment toward technology. Arthur struggled to understand Alice. Alice's life had taken a path completely opposite to Arthur's. She had grown up in a village, embracing a peaceful life in nature. In a world where technology advanced rapidly, Alice had always chosen to live slowly. She preferred solitude over the chaos of the modern world. Each day, she moved through life with slow but profound thoughts, shaping the silhouette of the man she dreamed of loving in her mind. When Arthur glanced at Alice's profile, he realized that very little in her life had been digitized. Yet, according to his algorithms, Alice seemed like a perfect match for him. She was a clue that could completely change Arthur's life, but he wasn't aware of it. To him, this was just a test. A few data points. How accurate could it really be? And yet, Arthur's algorithm had singled Alice out. He sent her a message, composing it without trying to understand his emotions, using a logical and detached tone. "Hello, I see that we've been matched. Would you like to meet?" One morning, Alice saw Arthur's message. Her first thought was strangely, who is this? Alice was not accustomed to meeting people in digital spaces. She believed human relationships were superficial there. Still, something made her decide to read the message. "Would you like to meet?" The sentence felt foreign to her. Knowing how distant she was from technology, this kind of invitation didn't make much sense to her. Yet, an instinct inside told her she shouldn't leave the message unanswered. Alice looked at Arthur's profile. He was the CEO of a high-tech company, a globally recognized figure. But there was nothing personal in his profile. No real emotions, no traces of a human soul. Just achievements, and more achievements. For a moment, Alice realized how monotonous and cold Arthur's life seemed. Could a person's existence really be defined by numbers alone? Still, Arthur's message left a question in Alice's mind. "Yes, we can meet," she replied. But deep in her heart, one question remained. Could true love be written by algorithms? Alice and Arthur agreed to meet at a small cafe a few days after she had replied to his message. Alice was hesitant about coming to the city. It felt like stepping into an unfamiliar world. She had always kept her distance from technology, but Arthur's interest in her had somehow sparked her curiosity. Still, she had no intention of impressing or charming him. For Alice, love wasn't something as simple as choosing an outfit. It was deep, complex, and challenging. That morning, Alice took her time choosing what to wear. What dress should she pick? What kind of impression should she leave? In a world where everything had become digital, she wondered how real human emotions could still be felt and understood. After a few minutes, she made her decision: a simple yet elegant dress and natural makeup. Alice was preparing herself for Arthur, but in reality, she was preparing her heart for whatever lay ahead. When she entered the cafe, Alice immediately noticed Arthur. He was sitting with his usual cold and professional demeanor. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment he froze. As Alice had decided to take this step, she had wondered whether she would meet the real Arthur. And now, here he was, his face filled with calculated intelligence and precision, intensifying the turmoil inside her. Arthur greeted Alice with a faint smile. After all, to him, this was just a test, an experiment with the system's proposed match. But as he looked at Alice, nothing was as expected. She was above all incredibly real, undeniably human. In the world of algorithms that Arthur had built, Alice was a presence that could not be quantified. Alice asked her first question. "Why did you choose me? I mean, I'm not exactly someone who gets along with technology." Arthur looked into her eyes with a hint of surprise before answering. "According to the system's match recommendations, we are the most compatible pair." His words were cold and mechanical, yet Alice noticed a slight shift in his gaze. For a fleeting moment, she thought that maybe Arthur was more than just an algorithm. At first, their conversation was dull. Alice carefully answered each question, trying to understand Arthur, while Arthur continuously analyzed Alice's responses, attempting to decipher her thoughts. It was an unfamiliar experience for both of them. Alice sensed an emptiness within Arthur. Deep in his eyes, something was missing. The raw, unfiltered emotions of a human being seemed absent. At one point, Alice smiled. "One day, do you think technology will really solve everything? Can it truly bring people together?" Arthur hesitated for a moment before responding. "Yes. Technology solves everything. Love is just another equation, like everything else." Alice took a deep breath at his response. "Then why are people still lonely? Why do loves end?" she asked. Arthur struggled to understand the question. To him, love was nothing more than a solution, a formula. But Alice had already found her own answer. Because love doesn't fit into a formula. It's something that touches the deepest corners of the heart. True love can only be found when people truly understand each other. Alice's words created a fracture in Arthur's mind. The solid structure within him began to crack, ever so slightly. He felt an unfamiliar pull toward Alice, but he couldn't rationalize it. Alice was offering Arthur something he had never experienced before: reality. A few weeks later, the relationship between Arthur and Alice gradually began to deepen. With every moment he spent with Alice, Arthur discovered something new about her. While Alice always maintained a distant stance toward technology, Arthur found himself increasingly drawn to her. But this was an unfamiliar feeling for him. Relationships and emotions had always been about numbers and analysis in his world. Now, beyond all of that, there was heart and emotion. One day, Alice invited Arthur on a nature walk. Arthur hesitantly accepted this unfamiliar offer. Alice was suddenly introducing him to a real world, something beyond the one he had always lost himself in behind screens. Slowly, with each moment spent with Alice, Arthur began to feel different. But at the same time, it was difficult to dive into the depths of the love that resided within Alice. One day, Alice said to Arthur, "Finding love in the digital world may be easy, but in reality, emotions are much more complex. When you try to reach the depths of the human heart, running an algorithm alone is never enough." As Arthur tried to internalize Alice's words, one day he told her, "Love created through technology, I believe, will be much more lasting. We can prove it with data." Alice simply smiled at Arthur's words. All right then, let's stay in your world. But the heart can never be defined by data alone. And so, despite their contrasts, their relationship continued to deepen. However, a conflict still lingered in Arthur's mind. He believed that technology could solve love. But Alice's simplicity was teaching him something much greater. The true formula for love lay beyond any algorithm. Bolum 6, Alice in Dunyasi. As Alice's relationship with Arthur deepened day by day, she found herself going through a profound transformation in her own world. Arthur's constant reliance on technology and data to connect with her created a kind of internal conflict within her. To Arthur, love was a formula, but in Alice's eyes, love was a feeling that grew in a person's heart, something that sprouted over time and blossomed into an emotion. As someone who sought truth in this world, Alice felt something towards Arthur's cold approach, a sense of incompleteness. One weekend, Alice invited Arthur to her village. Arthur viewed it as if it were a business meeting. To him, Alice's simple and ordinary way of life seemed overly basic. Yet, the persistent sparkle in Alice's eyes drew him into accepting the offer. Having always lived in a world of comfort, pushing the boundaries of technology to understand others, Arthur was a stranger in Alice's world. And yet, in some way, the simple village life Alice offered him might bring him an unexpected sense of peace. As Alice showed Arthur around, she introduced him to the power of simplicity and nature. Everything remained as it was, untouched in its natural state. She offered him freshly picked fruits, homemade jams, and coffee. The atmosphere was so warm and sincere that, for the first time, Arthur felt distanced from his technology-driven world. As he met Alice's gaze over a cup of coffee in a small village cafe, he noticed something strange in his own eyes: the emptiness within his own life. Alice suggested they go for a walk. Under the crimson hues of the setting sun, as they walked in silence, Alice suddenly spoke. "You know," she said, "everything has a meaning. And sometimes we humans have to go far to find that meaning. But in truth, it has always been right beside us. In our hearts." Arthur listened carefully to Alice's words. Her simple yet profound philosophy echoed deeply in his mind. He began to realize that technology, data, and systems were not as flawless as he had once believed. Alice's simplicity gave him a sense of peace, a real, undeniable sense of tranquility. But at the same time, that very peace unsettled him. Arthur had always lived with questions, believing that everything must have an answer. But Alice was showing him that not everything had to be perfect, and sometimes just living and existing was enough. The time Arthur spent in Alice's world was teaching him many things. However, there was still an unresolved knot within him: understanding Alice. Arthur believed that every question could be solved with technology, but Alice's simple way of thinking felt complex and chaotic to him. The love in Alice's heart was too deep to be explained by numbers and formulas. Arthur began to see this as a problem. One evening, while Arthur was with Alice, he felt something breaking inside him. He said, "Being with you is wonderful, but I still don't understand. I want to spend more time with you, but I can't open my heart. Something just doesn't feel right. I mean, everything seems right, but I feel like something is missing." Alice remained silent for a moment upon hearing Arthur's words. To her, what he was describing felt like a kind of insufficiency. "Arthur," she said, "true love does not come from a sense of lack. True love is always whole. But to feel it, you must listen to your heart, not your mind." Arthur paused for a moment. Until that day, he had always lived according to logic. He had believed that love was nothing more than a mathematical equation. But Alice's words shook his reasoning. The pull he felt toward Alice no longer felt like a formula. It felt like a search. As Arthur started to become a part of Alice's life, a profound transformation was beginning in his own world. Alice had begun to notice the change in Arthur. Something in his eyes was different. The cold, calculating gaze had been replaced with something warmer. As Alice watched him, she could feel the transformation within him. But at the same time, she also sensed Arthur's inner conflicts. He was still trying to solve love, still searching for the formulas. One day, Arthur took Alice's hand and said, "Alice, the time I've spent with you has taught me something. Love is not something that can be calculated. Loving someone isn't about seeing them as just an equation. Alice, I'm beginning to understand this now. I'm trying to feel love. But still, I'm a little scared, because everything I thought I knew about love was a lie. Alice looked into Arthur's eyes and smiled. Arthur, there's nothing to be afraid of. Love is not something to fear. Love is simply acceptance. Accepting each other with all our flaws, all our broken pieces, and loving each other just as we are. Arthur paused for a moment at Alice's words. All his logical thoughts, his belief that everything had to be perfectly calculated, were slowly fading away. Beside Alice, deep within his heart, he felt that something was truly right. In that moment, Arthur realized once again, true love was not written in calculations, but in the heart. Being with Alice had taught him that love could not simply be solved with formulas. And finally, he found the courage to say exactly how he felt. Alice, I love you. And now, I understand that true love is more important than anything else. Alice smiled and embraced him. This was the truest and most meaningful step Arthur had ever taken in his life. After Arthur finally confessed his feelings to Alice, he experienced a major transformation in his life. Having spent many years in the cold world of technology, trying to explain everything through algorithms and data, Alice was teaching him a truth. True love was beyond numbers and calculations. Arthur had started to understand that everything was shaped by emotions. At first, these emotions felt very foreign to him. Understanding the heart of a technological genius was not like solving a mathematical problem. Alice was always gently but persistently showing him what true love was, what it meant to love. However, the sparks inside Arthur sometimes felt like they were fading. His belief that everything had to be right, the logical search for solutions, occasionally threatened the emotional bond between them. Alice's perspective still echoed in Arthur's mind. Love is not a formula. It's shaped by emotions, by what you feel in your heart, she had said. And Arthur, day by day, was getting lost more and more in Alice's world. In her world, everything was slow and calm, yet so deep. With every step, with every touch, Alice was teaching him so much. One day, Alice asked Arthur a question. Arthur, what do you think is the best way to win someone's heart? Arthur initially responded with the logic he was used to. There is no single way. Compatibility, analysis, these help us find the best match. Alice smiled. But the way to win someone's heart is to hear their heart. To understand them. Everything else is just a lie. Arthur paused to think once again at Alice's words. Her sincerity made him feel closer to her every day. But taking one more step, opening up completely, was still very difficult for him. Sometimes he questioned whether what he felt was real, trying to understand if he truly loved Alice. As Alice deepened her relationship with Arthur, she felt like she was also undergoing a test. Arthur's world was completely intertwined with technology, and because of this, Alice felt every day the emptiness, the void within him. Arthur still couldn't fully open his heart. He couldn't clarify his feelings. This was becoming challenging for Alice. However, she knew that everything could change over time, and that she could help Arthur explore his emotional world. One evening, while walking by the seaside with Arthur, Alice said, Arthur, my love for you isn't because I want to solve you like an algorithm, but because I fell in love with the person inside you. I fell in love with your identity, your soul. But does this love ever scare you? Arthur paused for a moment in response to Alice's words. She had predicted his fears. Arthur was starting to understand how difficult it was to form an emotional connection. Alice was teaching him to dive into the depths of his heart and express his feelings honestly. Arthur thought for a moment. Sometimes I'm afraid, Alice, because opening my heart to you, showing you my true self, is so difficult. Maybe loving someone means giving yourself completely, losing control. And I've always wanted to maintain control over everything. Alice understood him. But love is not about control. It's about trusting each other and growing together. Arthur, I trust you. Show me yourself as you are. I love your heart, not your code. With these words from Alice, Arthur tried once again to open his heart. The peace within Alice gave him a true sense of trust. Arthur had begun to express his feelings for Alice. Now, Alice could better understand Arthur's fears and approach him with more patience. But there were still things within Arthur that needed to be resolved. Bolam 11, a skin dogal Hallie. One day, Alice and Arthur decided to spend time together in an old village house. Alice suggested a visit to the village market. Arthur hesitated to accept Alice's suggestion, but when he saw the determination in her eyes, he thought, well, what do I have to lose? This simple village trip would become a turning point in Arthur's thoughts. The market was a small but cheerful place where people sold traditional handmade products. As Arthur observed Alice's relationship with nature and people, he realized something. Despite Alice's distance from technology and innovations, there was an incredible depth in the connection she had with both people and nature. In the silence of the village, as Arthur watched Alice interact with those around her in her natural way, he understood that those warm emotional bonds were more valuable than anything that could be achieved with the most advanced technology. Throughout the day, a change began within Arthur. As he stepped into Alice's world, he slowly started to balance the relationship between his heart and mind. The idea that everything had to be perfect was slowly being shaken. Alice's world was far beyond any algorithm. It was real. That was why Arthur began to understand the simple yet powerful real love in Alice. He was now feeling his heart more freely and realizing how valuable emotional connections truly were. One day, Alice turned to Arthur and said, "Arthur, life is not an equation. Love is not a solution. But when we are together, the closer we get to each other, the more right it feels. And real love is the meaning we find in this feeling." Arthur smiled as he looked into Alice's eyes. "Alice, I've fallen in love with you. I've learned what real love is. And now, I feel like everything is right in my heart." When Arthur revisited his relationship with Alice, he realized the value of existing in a world beyond technology and the flow of data. Alice had taught him that love was not a formula, but a feeling. Love was about creating a balance between the heart and mind, opening oneself to another person, and most importantly, truly trusting the person in front of you. Arthur had lived for years in the digital world, in a cold and calculated way. But now, by Alice's side, he felt like a real human being. Love was no longer defined by numbers, but by feelings. Arthur had learned to grow together with Alice, to be with her, and to embrace life as it was. True love was hidden in this simple yet profound emotional connection. And Arthur had finally found the truest code for it: two hearts together. Arthur and Alice had grown even closer with each passing day. The emotional void in Arthur's mind was slowly being filled, and with Alice's teachings, he was building a new world in his heart. Alice, on the other hand, watched this transformation in Arthur's life with pride. But she also knew that it would take time to uncover the last layers within him and to truly trust him. One day, they had traveled together to an old town. While Alice was examining old books in the town market, she pulled Arthur aside and asked him, "Arthur, have you ever thought about how valuable time is? In a world where technology is advancing rapidly, we're always trying to solve things faster and reach things quicker. But maybe meaning lies in the moments we spend feeling time." Arthur, looking at Alice in surprise, replied, "I've always wanted to find quicker solutions. People, relationships, everything." But then he paused. What Alice had said suddenly began to echo in his mind. Time was beyond just solving or understanding something immediately. Truly feeling something, understanding it, and knowing the value of a moment could only happen over time. In his fast-paced world, Arthur had begun to understand the value of a moment in the silent moments spent with Alice. After their trip to the town, Arthur and Alice started spending more time together. Alice was teaching Arthur to live by feeling the flow of time together. This small town had created a revolution in Arthur's eyes. Alice lived her life step by step as a story, savoring each moment and embracing time as an experience. Arthur had decided to accept this experience and slow down the pace of time. Because with Alice, every passing minute was becoming more valuable. One day, Alice suggested that they talk about Arthur's past. At first, Arthur felt uncomfortable. His past was a period he constantly analyzed, but it hadn't left many emotional memories. Alice wanted to understand Arthur's past because, in her view, to truly love someone, you had to touch even the dark corners of their past to offer them a bright future. "Your past defines you, Arthur," Alice said, "but don't let it scare you. Everyone has a past. It's a part of your maturation process." Arthur, struggling a little but under Alice's patient gaze, began to speak about his past for the first time sincerely. He felt comfortable with Alice beside him. Arthur's father had disappeared when he was very young. This loss had left a great emptiness in Arthur's life. After his father's loss, forming emotional connections had become very difficult for Arthur. Technology had always given him a sense of security because mathematically, everything was clear. But love, trust, and connection, these emotions had always seemed distant and uncertain. Alice looked into Arthur's eyes and said, "Arthur, losses only make you stronger. Because every loss teaches you something new. As long as you're with me, nothing will leave you alone." Arthur was momentarily stunned by Alice's words. Alice was succeeding in helping him open up. Arthur was starting to make peace with the pain of his past. Alice's safe world was giving him the chance to rediscover life and love. The relationship between Alice and Arthur had transformed into a deep bond where they completely trusted each other. Every day, Arthur began spending more time in Alice's world. Alice, on the other hand, felt great happiness seeing the change within Arthur. When they were together, they realized how insignificant the past and future had become. Alice had shown Arthur that love was not just a feeling, but an experience. Living each moment together and savoring it were the most valuable parts of life. One morning, Arthur surprised Alice. He took her deep into their favorite forest. As Alice held Arthur's hand and walked, Arthur turned to her and said, "Alice, I've opened my heart to you. I've learned what it truly means to live real love, to feel it deeply. Together, we hold the greatest power in this world. I now know how valuable time, the past, and everything else is. I want to step into the future with you and understand everything." Alice smiled at Arthur and said, "Arthur, true love means living every moment with you. Everything in our future will be as it should be. Because our hearts are one, our feelings are one. True love is always whole." Arthur and Alice embraced. Without worrying about how quickly time was passing, being together and understanding each other was the most important thing in the world. Every step they took forward was beyond an algorithm. True love was beyond everything. In this journey with Alice, Arthur had found real connection. After their journey to the village, Arthur and Alice returned to their life in the city. However, everything felt different now. As Alice witnessed the changes within Arthur, she began to live every moment life offered them more deeply and meaningfully. Arthur had realized that the most important thing he had learned during his time with Alice was that loving and being loved was also a learning process. Alice, in turn, had not only guided Arthur on his inner journey, but had also been his greatest support in his emotional evolution. One evening, Arthur decided to do something very special for Alice. He could feel even more the admiration he had for Alice's world in her eyes. They had experienced so much together, but there was a moment that would bring everything to its peak. A moment when Arthur would truly enter Alice's life and make her feel that she belonged to him, heart and soul. That evening, they decided to go near the old village house that Alice loved. This time, they would embark on a different journey. Arthur planned to take Alice to the house and propose to her. The peace he found in Alice's eyes had strengthened Arthur's trust and love in his heart. To promise Alice that he would be by her side for a lifetime was an important step for him. Alice noticed why Arthur seemed so excited that evening. As he always did, Arthur presented his proposal with a calm but sincere tone. "Alice, over this time we've grown together, shared every moment, and now I want to see you by my side for a lifetime. I want to spend every day with you, grow old with you, and overcome every challenge with you. This is the most real moment when I've completely opened my heart to you." Alice looked at Arthur with sparkling eyes and said, "Arthur, I've also offered you my heart completely. I truly love you, and I want to share this life with you, spend every day with you." In that moment, Alice accepted Arthur's proposal. The love and trust within Arthur no longer knew any barriers. Alice had not only taught him the meaning of true love, but together they had built a path that would lead to a lifetime of shared experiences. This was not just a celebration of the bond they shared, but also of the love of life as a whole. Both characters had found their home in each other's hearts. After their engagement, Arthur and Alice began to imagine how they would build their lives together. Arthur was no longer just a guest in Alice's world. He was a part of it. Alice, on the other hand, had understood Arthur's worldview and had shown him not only the power of love and trust, but also what patience and growing together truly meant. Their relationship was deepening more every day, and every emotional moment was becoming more meaningful. Alice suggested to Arthur that they escape the chaos of the big city and buy a farmhouse together. Living in nature, working with their hands, spending time with animals. At first, Arthur was a bit distant to the idea. Technology and speed in the city were the things that had always guided his life. But Alice helped him discover the nature and simplicity within himself. The life they would live on the farm offered him not just a new beginning, but also a chance to find the inner peace he had lost in the past. As he lived immersed in nature, right next to technology, he began to feel the peace growing inside him. They began to set up their farm together. When Arthur decided to settle down next to Alice, he realized that something much more important than his successes in the city was that he had lost himself in nature and simplicity. Every day, as he worked alongside Alice, tending to the land, he was stepping into a more meaningful world. By stepping away from technology, he had begun to discover the true meaning of life. Alice had helped him reconcile with his past, feel his emotions, and build a happy future together. Every day, as Arthur and Alice watched the sunrise together, they were reminded once again of how precious life was. All of Arthur's analyses and calculations in his mind were now left behind. True love was accepting life as it is. This love existed in a world beyond technology, one that Arthur had found with Alice. As Arthur and Alice adapted to farm life, their bond grew even stronger. Arthur, who had once believed that everything in the world of technology should be solved through data and algorithms, gradually learned that love was something much deeper and freer. Alice, by being by his side on his emotional journey, had taught him that everything is part of a complementary cycle. She had helped him find peace in both the world of technology and nature by establishing a balance between the two. One day, when they reached a new turning point on their farm, Alice turned to Arthur and said, "This time we've spent together has shown me this, Arthur. You can never truly know how valuable it is to love someone. But when we're together, we can create a world where everything is perfect. Love is not an algorithm, it's something that lives in every moment." Arthur smiled and hugged her. "Yes, Alice. True love is simply being able to exist together. And with you, I've found the most valuable thing in the world." And so, the story of Arthur and Alice not only demonstrated the power of love, but also how deep and meaningful life could truly be. Arthur and Alice, with each passing day on their farm, grew to love life more and felt each moment more deeply. They had found a balance between technology and nature, and both had learned so much from each other. Arthur felt every moment spent with Alice filled with a peace he had never experienced before. Alice had taught him to live not just through algorithms, but through senses, emotions, and real connections. One morning, they decided to celebrate the arrival of spring with a picnic on the farm. Arthur realized that everything gained meaning when he was with Alice. As they walked forward, he had learned to value every moment of life. Once again, Alice reminded him, "Arthur, the beauty of life is often hidden in the little things. A flower, the sound of a bird, a smile. True love is feeling these things together." Arthur, holding Alice's hand, replied, "Yes, Alice, I now truly understand how precious these small moments are. The most valuable thing in this world is every moment I spend with you." At their picnic, surrounded by nature, Arthur and Alice felt closer to each other than ever. Alice was happy to see Arthur's growth and found herself becoming more connected to him each day. Arthur was no longer the lonely, lost man from his past. In Alice's heart, he had found true love. One evening, Alice told Arthur that the time had come for something she had been thinking about for a long time. "Arthur, every moment we've spent together has been the most beautiful time of my life. We've learned and grown so much together. Now, I feel ready to turn a new page in our lives," she said. Arthur looked into Alice's eyes and asked, "What do you mean?" Alice took a deep breath and continued, "I'm thinking about starting a family, Arthur. I imagine how beautiful it would be to have a child together, to raise them together. Our love can guide them. Together, we can teach them to love the world." When Arthur heard Alice's words, he felt an indescribable happiness in his heart. He thought that everything was as it should be, that their lives were coming together, and that they would pass on this love to the next generation. "Alice, my heart is completely open to this thought. Building a family together, creating a life with you, This is what gives meaning to everything. A new chapter was opening in Alice and Arthur's lives, one that would take their love a step further. With the patience Alice had shown, she had taught him not only what love was, but also the power of being together and the value of overcoming every challenge. Arthur, by Alice's side, felt that he was not just a partner, but also a friend, a companion, and a life partner. Each new day together had become a journey of discovery, growth, and love. Alice and Arthur's journey was not an algorithm, an equation, or a formula. It was a love that matured over time, felt deeply in the heart, and made every moment meaningful. They had decided to build their future together. One of the most important things Alice had taught him was that true love was shaped by a life lived together. And now, both of them were ready to take the next step on this path, side by side. Alice and Arthur were building the most precious part of their life together, growing closer with each passing day. Alice's natural love had taught Arthur what life truly meant. Stepping away from the cold world of technology and data and into the warm world of nature and humanity had transformed Arthur's entire world. By Alice's side, Arthur found a trust and peace beyond everything. True love couldn't be written in numbers or solved with codes. True love was the understanding between two people, believing in each other, and growing together by living every moment side by side. The future for Alice and Arthur had become more than an uncertainty. It was a life to be built together. By creating a family, they would pass on the love they shared to the next generation. In every step, in every small detail, there was meaning, a story. And as Arthur looked at Alice, he realized once again that love was not just a formula or an algorithm, but a feeling that grew with every moment, coming from the heart. This was the moment when Arthur had found true love. And this love, as always, lasted forever. The new year was a turning point for Alice and Arthur. While continuing to live peacefully with nature and technology at their farm, their lives gained more meaning each passing day. Thanks to Alice, Arthur began to feel the speed of time and make every moment more valuable. Alice, on the other hand, found trust, love, and peace within Arthur. The life they built together had changed both of their lives forever. One day, Alice and Arthur decided to take on a new area of their farm. They had slowly started to expand their farm and develop themselves with new projects. Alice, smiling at Arthur, said, "Arthur, maybe this farm isn't just for us, but could be an example for others. People want to see how technology and nature can harmonize. The balance we've created here could inspire other lives," Alice said, with a bright hope in her eyes. When Arthur heard Alice's words, he felt a warmth in his heart. The life they had built together meant so much. Now, this dream was growing not just for them, but in a way that could touch a broader world. "Yes," Arthur said, "this farm is a reflection of the peace we've built, and I feel that it could inspire people. In a world where people are lost in technology, they need to rediscover the balance and peace that nature offers." Alice smiled. "Together, I want to offer people a more sustainable and happy lifestyle, living in harmony with nature. By blending technology and nature, we can show them how they can live a better life." This idea sparked a fire within Arthur. At that moment, the thought of expanding the world they had built together gave a new direction to his life. His relationship with Alice was turning into a project that not only impacted their lives but could also touch others. The peaceful world they had created together could become a model for others. Arthur and Alice decided to make their farm a place where more people could come, see, and find inspiration. They aimed to not only grow produce, but also live in harmony with nature and learn how to support this with technology. While Alice continued to teach Arthur the rhythm of nature, Arthur began integrating technology into this balance. After a while, they established a training center around their farm. They wanted to teach people how to live sustainably and balance nature with technology. They had big projects for the future. They were advocating for a lifestyle deeply connected to nature, while also showing how to adapt this understanding to the digital world. Both were excited about sharing everything they had learned in their lives with others, reaching a wider audience. Alice turned to Arthur and said, "We've accomplished something together, Arthur. But true success is inspiring others, involving them in this balance. Once we achieve that, this farm will not only be ours, but a part of everyone." Arthur, holding Alice's hand, replied, "Yes, with you, everything is possible. Growing together and teaching people real peace and balance is the most valuable thing we can do in this world. And so, Arthur and Alice took a big step to bring the peace they had created in their own lives into the lives of others. Their farm had become a place where both nature and technology coexisted harmoniously. Here, people were not only learning how to grow produce, but also how to find inner peace and balance. Focusing on their ever-growing projects, Alice and Arthur continued to strengthen their love for each other. The world they had built together was growing not only physically, but emotionally. This life, where everything was in its right place, had become a way of life that brought peace to both them and others. A year later, a grand celebration was held on their farm. Arthur and Alice were filled with pride as they shared the lifestyle they had built together with more people. They felt that everything was on the right path. They had learned how to harmoniously integrate technology with nature, people, and the environment, and had passed this knowledge on to others. Arthur turned to Alice and said, "Every moment with you makes each day more meaningful. The world we've created together has changed not only our lives, but the lives of others. This was just the beginning, but now I truly feel how special everything is." Alice smiled and replied, "Arthur, we've achieved everything together. With you, we've found both our world and each other. The future will be beautiful with us." Their journey had started like a fairy tale, but in reality, their love and the world they shared had become a growing truth with each passing day. They had truly discovered one another, complementing each other's shortcomings. The story of Alice and Arthur was the most beautiful example of not only love, but also discovering the meaning of life, growing together, and the trust they had in each other. And so, Alice and Arthur's story came to a happy ending, with new beginnings and endless love. Though they didn't know what the future would hold, they decided to face every challenge together and live each moment to the fullest. Because they had found each other, grown together, and would always remain side by side. And their story would live on, always and everywhere.